This week on the show, we are diving deep into the 5-element theory. So I've touched on this theory a few times on the show, just like yin and yang and qi and blood. It's the kind of thing that you can't really talk about Chinese medicine and explain what's happening without using this sort of guide and map of the 5 elements. But on this episode, I really focus my lens on what this theory is. Why would anyone want to use it in their life? And then I get really deep into each and every element: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. I cover categories such as nature and environment, sensory and aesthetic, the body and our organs, as well as our mind and emotions. If you would like to learn more about the 5-element theory, 2 things you can do. 1, you can sign up for my newsletter and you will receive a free PDF guide on this theory. And 2, you can sign up for my Patreon, where I will dive even deeper. This podcast is the prerequisite for the follow-up that will be on my Patreon, but I will dive deeper into how you can use these elements to create further balance and harmony in your life. Welcome to the School of Whispers podcast. This is your host, Stephanie. I'm a licensed acupuncture physician and herbalist with a background in psychology, health sciences, and exercise physiology. Within my own spiritual awakening, I found myself learning pivotal lessons when I got myself to be in silence. Within that silence, the whispers came through. This is my sacred space of vulnerable storytelling, where my guests and I share about the magic that comes from a life of following these whispers. I'm grateful you made it here, and I hope this show inspires you to live a life of following your own whispers. Let's get into the show. Welcome to the show. If you're brand new, if you're returning, it's good to see you again, my friend, or rather feel you. And let's just jump right into this topic, because I feel like it's going to take a lot of time to get through all of it. And there's just a lot of rich information here. But actually, before I do, a few things. 1, I've covered this on the show a few times. I'm going to include in the show notes a couple of episodes where I have touched on the 5-element theory, or especially after listening to this, you'll be able to have a much richer sort of foundation to listen to the episodes over. Honestly, I'm going to be that person, and I'm going to recommend that you do listen to my Chinese medicine episodes more than once, because they're just so full of information. I know for myself, when I re-listen, I get overwhelmed the first time I listen, and I'll have to pause. And then the second time I'll be like, okay, yeah, I remember saying that, and I'll learn more things. So yeah, I'm going to have the audacity to recommend you give me more time, more of your time and energy, and re-listen if you really want to become proficient in this information. The other thing I want to tell you is I created an ebook all about this stuff that I will be referencing throughout this conversation. It's really, really beautiful guide that you can, I've made it so that's really practical and easy to look at. It's beautifully done. I think it's just easy on the eyes. So if you're a visual learner, I recommend you sign up for my newsletter. I'll link it in the show notes, and you'll receive a free PDF guide to everything that I've covered. I'll also probably have information there that I won't be able to fully get in on today. It's a 20-page guide, so it's a lot. And in terms of the newsletter, I will say this. I really don't like newsletters. Whenever I sign up, I pretty quickly unsubscribe, because I'm just bombarded with products that I just I don't need to buy things, it's just like this influx of, hey, you didn't think you need this, but let me tell you why you need this. Like, I don't want to be told why I need something that I don't need. And then also sometimes people will make it like a diary entry of like the moment I knew I was a medicine woman, and like, power to you, but to be completely frank and a bit crass, I don't give a shit. So, with this newsletter, I'm going to keep it simple, practical. My intention with it is to make it useful for you. So, it'll be monthly, and I will just include updates about the podcast, about retreats, offerings, and I'll also include relevant herbs, herbal formulas, acupuncture points, or like Qigong moves, Chinese medicine related things that are relevant to the season that we're moving through, or maybe what's kind of like the collective sort of vibe that everyone's moving through at present. Like, for example, with the craziness that's always happening in the world, I would incorporate in the newsletters some things about moving stress and chi. And also, if you sign up for the newsletter, I'll be starting to create a lot more ebooks for sale, and eventually doing workshops that may have a limited capacity. So you'll be the first to know about it, as well as any ebooks that I put out. You'll get discounts on them. So yeah, sign up for that newsletter. I will not be disrespectful of your time and energy, nor sell your information. I don't even know how to do that, and I don't have the time to learn. So show notes, and let's get into this guide to the 5-element theory. So as I mentioned before, all this information is super deep, and I'm also only scratching the surface. My recommendation to you is don't try to digest it all at once. I'm going to keep it as simple as possible, but I'm also going to give my take, special pieces of information that might help create more richness to your understanding and help you remember, because I had to memorize all of this in school. So I got neat little tips and tricks on remembering these sort of things. And yeah, just go through this podcast as slow as you need to. Go through the guide as slow as you need to. Notice what resonates. Notice what may be triggering, because that's also extremely revealing. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out. You'll find my information in the show notes. And if you want to really work with a practitioner, deep dive into your pattern, gain better insight into your element, how to move or nourish, or just, shift the energy within your internal 5-element cycle. You can also find my information in the show notes on services that I provide to work remotely with you to really deep dive into all of this. So what is the 5-element theory? I see it as a sort of map, compass, as well as puzzle that you can use as a reference point to understand not only what's happening in the world around you, but also what's inside of you. And it's more than just physiological, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it follows the natural pattern of life and all the life and death cycles that we go through within our own existence here in this realm. It's not a new thing. It's not a trend. It's something that's ancient, that was developed by the forefathers and foremothers of Chinese medicine. And it was really through their observation of nature. Chinese medicine actually began with Qigong, and Qi is life force energy. Gong means cultivation. So it's the cultivation of your life force. And how Qigong began was farmers watching according to my research, but there's also many different theories, but it was through farmers watching animals in nature that they developed these Qigong forms. And through these forms, they became aware of the aliveness of the energy within them and certain points activating more than others. So the 5 elements, which are fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, let's look at them as elements that are physical. And we're going to use a lot of sort of references to nature, but they're also living archetypes that we embody in our lives. And somebody can be a fire type, a wood type, an earth, a metal type. You can be combinations. But I really want to emphasize that this isn't a sort of personality test or a human design, or it's not like astrology where you're Virgo for life. Yes, your avatar of human and your soul may gravitate towards certain elements, but I really want you to wrap around the idea that while you may gravitate, don't put yourself in a box of one element. I have done that. And I have mentioned it to other practitioners, and I've had other practitioners do that to me. And it actually hindered my treatment and my progression within my patterns and being able to move out of these patterns. So yeah, don't put yourself in a box. Always remember that you contain every single element. So the way that the 5 element theory looks, if you haven't heard me describe it before, how this sort of roadmap is, it's fire pointing to earth, earth pointing to metal, metal pointing to water, water pointing to wood, wood pointing to fire. And that's called the generating sequence. I will get deeper into that. First, I want to dive into each element. And then within that circle, there's going to be a sort of star. And that's another cycle called the controlling cycle. But again, I'll get into that later. But why I'm mentioning it now is because these arrows refer to the harmonic flow of all the elements. And just like with yin yang theory, like everything in Chinese medicine is all about harmony and balance. So when there is a shift in balance, it's really palpable, not just physiologically in our body, but within our emotions, within our ability to move forward in life or have a sense of purpose. Like you can just apply this to literally every aspect of the human existence. And, like so many of us, we don't know how to honor, like we're not taught how to honor what we need or even how to understand what we need. So that's why I think everyone, that's why I talk about this and I preach about this and I created this ebook, because it changed my life. It continuously changes my life. The deeper I go, and I'm 5 years into the first time I learned about this pattern. And I was so emotional when I first learned about it, because I was just like, oh shit. It all made sense. It felt like I had learned it before. And some of you while listening may feel that way. Some of you may be like, this is completely new to me. And that's normal too. There's a lot of people within my program where some of us, it just clicks. It just makes sense. And then for others, it takes a little bit more effort, which may mean this is your soul's first go around with this medicine. And so what a valuable, precious time for you. And I'm really honored that you're here with me to learn with me, because as I'm saying this stuff out loud, I might be like, oh, fuck. Okay. So the last thing I want to say is why I start with fire, earth, metal, water, wood. My teacher taught me how to memorize this, because there's so many times within my life, within my practice, where I'm like, oh, okay, wait, let's try to remember what the cycle is. What are the elements? She taught me Fem, Wa, Wu. Fem, F-E-M, fire, earth, metal, Wa, water, Wu, wood. So Fem, Wa, Wu is the way that I memorized the 5 elements, and maybe that'll help you as we go through this. Oakley dokley. So at this point, it's kind of hard. I'm going to be listing off information and I'll be stopping here and there. It's hard for me to memorize information when it's just listed off, both when I'm listening to someone and when I am reading something. So if you have the guide, I recommend you pull it up so that you can listen and read at the same time, because that's how I memorize things, and then I'll say it out loud. But all right. We're going to start with the water element. I know that I just said Fem Wa Wu, but the water element in a lot of indigenous cultures is known as the beginning. of all life, the beginning of all the elements. Without water, none of us would be here. It just feels like a natural starting point. So we're going to begin there. The categories for each element that I'm going to go through relates to the nature and environment, sensory and aesthetic, the body and the organs, and then the mind and the emotions. So the season for water is winter. Think about January, beginning of the year, winter. Think about also before life can begin, we're in that death phase. And the stage of development for water is elderhood. But I personally feel like I really walk my life very closely with death. And I know that it's where we come from and it's where we return. So elderhood is also a returning as well as a turning inward. The climate and environmental factor for water is a cold climate. So in Chinese medicine, we have 5 environmental factors that we always consider when we are looking at what may have caused a pattern externally or internally. Externally would be through the seasons, and internally would be through foods that we eat. So winter is cold, but food like cold papaya that's been in the fridge is also going to be extremely cold in nature. The direction for the water element is north. And the time of day, so Chinese medicine has an organ clock, and the time of day for the water element is 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. 3 to 5 p.m. is the time for the bladder, which is, I'm kind of jumping around here, but that is the yang organ for the water element. 3 to 5 p.m., bladder, yang organ. And then 5 to 7 p.m. is the time for the kidneys. The kidneys are the yin organ of the water element. If you are really curious about the Chinese medicine clock, Chinese medicine, and our organ pathways when it comes to sleep, because this is where 3 to 7 p.m., especially 5 to 7 p.m. is where our sleep cycles begin, check out the show notes, and I have a whole podcast on sleep from a Chinese medicine perspective. All right, sensory and aesthetic. So the color for the water element is black. This is really important when it comes to food therapy. It's a really good cheat sheet to know, okay, what foods are going to nourish my water element or nourish my kidneys. So things like black sesame seed, seaweed, I know it's technically green, but like seaweed is, considered dark. Shilajit would also be considered really helpful for the water element, and it's black, and so on and so forth. The taste for, again, really important for food therapy for the water element is salty. So think of your seafoods. Think of mussels, clams, oysters, seaweed, miso soup. And the smell or odor for the water element is putrid. So think of like ammonia. The smell is always a little bit tough for me to kind of wrap my head around sometimes. But by now, I definitely can recognize that water element smell. Where I used to work, well, usually treatment rooms in general are fairly small and they don't really have windows. And so it's really easy to smell the patient, and especially if they don't wear perfumes or deodorants. But, honestly, despite like really strong smelling products that people wear, you could still kind of smell through that. And I remember one time my patient had that, what I would describe as a putrid smell. And I asked her, like, hey, how are your kidneys doing? She goes, oh, it's funny you ask. I'm actually struggling with a kidney infection right now. So yeah, it's really crazy to me in my practice how real this is and applicable to real life. Yeah, it all is. So the sound for the water element is groaning. Think of like your old guy getting up, his bones and knees and lower back, which is also strongly connected to the kidney channel and the water element. He gets up and he's like, oh. But think about too, just somebody who constantly is like groaning in general, like, I don't want to do this, because the emotion, I'm jumping around again, but the emotion for the water element is fear. So think about that person who's like resisting going to do something. Like, I think for me, when I have to have a hard conversation, especially in like a business capacity, you will hear that groan from me. Okay, so the correlation of body and organs for the water element. As I mentioned before, the yin or zong organ for the water element is the kidneys. The yang organ or fu organ. So zong is yin, fu is yang. And I know that actually, as I say it out loud, is pretty confusing. So I'm just going to stick with yin and yang. Is the bladder. Yang organ is the bladder. The body tissues for the water element are the bones and the marrow. So in Chinese medicine, the marrow is actually considered to be a substance of the brain. But if you just think about it, so the water element is really strongly associated with our essence. And our essence, it runs deep within our veins. It runs deep within our bones. So think about how when you crack open a bone, what do you see inside? You see that marrow. You see that sort of gelatinous substance that is like the very essence of us. I can also kind of think about how as we age, we kind of become a little bit more creaky and marrow is very slippery. And so, yeah, that's just how I've remembered bones and marrow water element. The external manifestation of the water element is the head hair that we have. So if somebody has really thick, lustrous hair, then their water element, their kidneys, their essence are doing really well. If somebody has brittle, dry hair, you're going to want to look into their water element. How are their kidneys doing? But there's also going to be, that's a little bit complicated because there will be other organ pathways involved when it comes to thinning dry, brittle hair. But especially with graying / prematurely graying hair. So we in Chinese medicine receive the coloring of our hair from our water element, from our essence and kidneys. So when our water element's being diminished, then our hair is going to start to show up as gray or white. Something that's helped me remember that is I think about often when women, after giving birth, after having children, that takes a lot of essence. That really depletes our water element, especially as women, as we age, our water yin element is very easily used up. And so some women will start to see gray hairs after giving birth because it's a depletion of the essence in the water within. The sense organs for the water element are the ears. And this is kind of interesting. So fun fact, in Chinese medicine, there's face map reading. And when somebody has long earlobes, it shows that one, they have really great kidney essence, sort of kidney energy, water element energy. But when their earlobes are long too, it shows that they're going to be apparently, they're going to be well taken care for as they age later on in their life. So that's kind of a fun way to try to remember the water element and aging. The body fluid for the water element is urine. I think that goes without saying, but let's go back to the emotion I mentioned with the water element, fear. When we feel a lot of fear, sometimes when it's super extreme, we can pee ourselves. That's, to me, a helpful connection correlation. And then finally, for the body and organs, the energetic action and movement within, but also without, or externally within nature is contraction and sinking. So let's go back to the climate of the water element, cold. What does cold do or make us do? It makes us contract, right? We draw our arms towards ourselves and we start to shiver. You can also look at it as when you have like a gravy from a meat that you cooked, if you are a meat cooker, and you put it in the fridge, or even coconut oil, like coconut oil in general, or just fatty grease, when it's hot, it spreads wide. But when you put it in the fridge and it becomes cold, it starts to contract and coagulate. And I will preach this till the day I die. That is what cold foods do in the stomach. So a salad, a smoothie, a raw juice. It's going to contract the stomach, an environment that actually needs heat and warmth and expansion, and it's going to slow everything down. Also, with the sinking, you can think of it as a stone being dropped into water or a seed being dropped into the earth. Again, that moving down, turning within sort of death phase, or think of like a body decomposing into the earth, sinking into the earth. The mind and emotions for the water element. Emotion I mentioned before, fear. The virtue for the water element is wisdom. And the aspect of the Shen or spirit is called the Zhi, and it's also known as willpower. If you are curious to know more about the Shen, check out show notes. I have a whole episode about a 2-part series actually about the spirits in Chinese medicine. I'm not going to get deeper into what the Zhi is. If you want to know more about that, check out that episode, but it's endlessly fascinating, truly. Okay, let's look at the wood element now. The natured environment for the wood element is spring, new life. The stage of development or growth phase is birth into adolescence. So it's that growth and becoming. The climate or environmental factor for the wood element is wind. So think about when the winds of change come in. Also think of spring in general is just kind of like a volatile season when it comes to constantly raining or windy or sunny. It's like the weather doesn't know what to do. So it's constantly changing with the wind. But also in Chinese medicine, wind as an environmental factor externally, so influencing the body, it is very strongly associated with allergies as well as catching colds. And cold and flu season typically is around that kind of like late winter, early spring sort of time. Think of the pollen in the air, you're sneezing a lot more. And then I just think about pollination in general, growth of new plants and flowers and blah, blah, blah really relies on wind as a factor. The direction for the wood element is east. The times of day related to the wood element are 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. Again, if you're really curious about sleep, insomnia, and all the nuances in between, Chinese medicine, show notes. This is typically a time where a lot of people will have a hard time sleeping. They'll experience night sweats. I typically will experience muscle cramping. Cramping is very strongly associated with the wood element. So I'll get into that in a little bit as to why. But the yang organ associated with wood is the gallbladder, and its time is between that 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. My cat is here. He's like, I'm ready for dinner. He's okay. Gallbladder time is 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. And then the yin organ for the wood element is the liver. And its time on the Chinese medicine clock is 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. So any trouble falling asleep or staying asleep during those times in the night points to your wood element. Okay, as I mentioned before, the stage of development is birth into adolescence, the growth and becoming phase of life. So sensory and aesthetic. The color for the wood element is green. Again, food therapy. Think about all your green foods, but also say if our which I'll get into in a little bit, our emotions we're experiencing a lot of anger, frustration. Think about spring. It is all about that green color. But if you're experiencing like anger, frustration, or having a liver associated pattern, being able to get some green on your eyeballs is just like forest bathing, just being outside, especially eating outside. That is extremely beneficial for your element system. The wood and the earth element work really closely in tandem. And so the wood element can also, which I don't have in the book, but it's also associated with our nervous system. And our nervous system, if it's going haywire, it's going to strongly affect our digestive system via the vagus nerve. So green things on the eyeballs are just so soothing to the nervous system, to the digestive system, hence why eating outside is really wonderful for both. The taste for the wood element is sour. So think of sauerkraut, just fermented things in general, although that's also kind of leans towards the fire element here. But yeah, sour tasting things are very strongly associated with wood element. The smell and the odor is rancid. So think about oil or fat that's gone slightly off. That sort of smell is going to, point to the wood element. And think of, okay, oil or fat, gallbladder. The gallbladder digests fat in the body. So if the gallbladder is having a difficult time, this isn't literally happening, but think of it from an energetic standpoint, that fat is just accumulating in the body, and that bile isn't being able to do its job. And so things are going to go slightly off, and that smell is going to come out through your pores. The sound for the wood element is shouting. So somebody who, have you ever had somebody talk to you and you're like, well, why are you shouting? I'm right here. I can hear you. That's going to be an excess within the wood element. Somebody who has an inability to shout, maybe they have a really raspy voice. The wind can also really have a strong effect on our voice in general, losing our voices. Again, that points to the wood element. So body and organs, once again, yin organ, liver, yang organ, gallbladder. Body tissue is the tendons and sinews. You could also think of it as the ligaments. So I know that I lean towards the wood element in general because of all my signs and symptoms, but the fact of the matter is my truest nature is the fire element. And for years, people were like, oh, you're wood, you're wood, you're wood. But actually, I wasn't wood. My wood was off, and it was overpowering my fire. So my true nature. So that's, again, where that deficit is of like trying to put yourself in a box here. But I'm somebody who tends to be hypermobile within my joints, and I will unconsciously, I've had to learn how to use my muscles and not my tendons and ligaments to lift weights. I also I have a history. I've never broken a bone, thank God. I rarely ever pull muscles, but I have strained my tendons or experienced inflammation on my tendons and ligaments. Also, like body type wise, somebody who it has longer sinewy limbs like I do, again, points to the wood element. The external manifestation of the wood element is the nails. So something that's kind of fun to look at is the color of your nails. If your nails are super pale, that's going to point to a blood deficiency within the liver pathway. If you have purplish nails, that's going to point towards blood stagnation. Or maybe if you look at your toes, and your toes are typically get really cold easily, like my toes can sometimes have my toenails will have a bluish tinge. And then also, I'm kind of getting a little off topic, but just to further paint the picture, the liver channel runs up the inside of the inner thighs. And I often, I'm touching them right now and they're really cold. And I often will experience muscle cramping and just sensations of cold on my inner thighs, which is where the liver channel runs, as well as the wood element. So it kind of began at my toenails and makes its way all the way up. The sense organs of the wood element are the eyes, and the body fluids are tears. So I think that kind of goes without saying, but think also too how when the wind blows in our eyes and we get tears in our eyes, or we have allergies and our eyes swell up or tear up, again, there's just that further connection. The energetic action of the wood element or movement is expansion. So as I mentioned before, muscle cramping is really strongly associated with the wood element because it's that inhibition to expand. And when that expansion is hindered, which I'm going to get into a little bit deeper in a moment, we can feel frustration, and that is the emotion of the wood element. I think of too, personality type, somebody who's very expansive and who's always forward moving and always thinking ahead. The wood element is really celebrated actually in our society and in terms of the school system. A child who tends towards the wood element is often celebrated and rewarded within the school system. Whereas in the water element, it's that contraction or sinking. So think about somebody who deep dives into all these things. I think of sort of astrologically like a Pisces. Like, I don't know about you, but the Pisces I know, they know a lot about just like deep dives and conspiracies and whatnot that moves more towards the water element. So there's this really great book called Fire Child, Water Child. It's for free on Audible. Highly recommend you listen to it if you want to gain a better understanding of, from a personality point of view, which element do you tend towards, or the way that you process information. The two elements I would say that are really celebrated are metal and wood within the school system, which in turn is just like society in general, because the way the school system runs in the West is very reflective of just work and society in general. So the water element, a water child or a fire child, would actually struggle typically in a traditional assembly line, factory mindset school setting, because that water child may be considered ADD. Somebody who really fixates on things and wants to dive deeper into that. And while I'm comparing and contrasting water and wood, cramping is also strongly associated with the water element. It's because, like I mentioned, like my inner thighs, sometimes I'll experience cramping and they feel cold to the touch. Water element there. So again, it all exists within a spectrum. If me jumping back and forth confuses you, you're just going to have to wrap your head around that no element exists within a container by itself. It just all flows into one another. The mind and emotion aspect of the wood element. So emotion, anger, frustration. Somebody who easily flares towards anger may have an excess within the wood element. Somebody who represses their anger may have a combination of excess and deficiency. And while I'm actually talking about emotions, experiencing emotions and expressing emotions, there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong or pathological about it. It is the obsession and the repression of the emotion. So that person who has that constant road rage, sometimes those people will be really proud of it, or how they interact with others in a business setting. Like they're proud of themselves for being a bully and being angry. That's an obsessive tendency towards anger. Or that person who's all love and light, who's the peacekeeper in the family, they're likely repressing their anger. So that's also going to point towards wood. And the truth of the matter is when you're operating from a place of excess or repression of anger, you're strongly hindering your growth, not only as a person, but the ability to grow with others around you. And while we're just talking about frustration, I don't know about you, but nothing gets me crying more than frustration. So crying, tears, being the body fluid of the wood element. The spirit or Shen aspect of the wood element is the Hun, and this has to do with our ability to be creative and imaginative. The virtue of the wood element is benevolence, but I would also say fierce compassion. If you're like me and you're really into the just understanding the emotions and the virtues around the elements, show notes, the podcast about the spirits is really rich within all of that. Okie dokie, fire element. The season for the fire element is summer. The climate or environmental factor is heat. Those two seem pretty straightforward. I don't think I need a lot of explanation. The direction is south. The time of day is 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So the yin organ is the heart and the yang organ is the small intestine. So let's look at the organ clock. And actually things get a little tricky here with the fire element, but we're going to keep it simple for now. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. is the time of day for the heart. 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. is the time of day for the small intestine. So 11 to 1 heart time. This is a really great time to really focus on our blood circulation, eat lunch, move your body. This is a high energy time of day, so maybe have a workout. And then the 1 to 3 is, okay, we've had breakfast, we've had lunch. Typically, that should be the two biggest meals of your day. So your body is starting to also kind of turn down its energy towards the water element. Again, remember the bladder and the kidney water element are from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. And so your body's starting to sort and absorb food. So this is a good siesta hour. And everything after this point, this is why they say eat breakfast like a king. I think it's like lunch like a lord and dinner like a peasant. So have your two largest meals be before the fire element runs out, because also, if you think about Ayurveda, that Agni, that fire is really important for the digestion, as well as in Chinese medicine, the stomach thrives on a warm environment. Okay, so where things are kind of complicated is there's also two other yin-yang organ pairs that are associated with the fire element. And this is really unique because the fire element's the only one that also has 4 organs related to it. But it would be, I'm not going to get too strongly into them, but it would be the pericardium and the sanjiao, or the triple burner. Pericardium is 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Triple burner is 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Yeah, I'm just not going to, I guess what I'll say is the pericardium is the protector of the heart. It is that protective muscle layer around the heart. And then the triple burner, or sanjiao, it is basically our metabolism and our lymphatic system. It's the system of processing. So triple burner, we have upper burner, upper body, middle burner, stomach, digestion. Then lower burner is our reproductive organs, as well as our large intestine, colon area, and our bladder. So it just has to do with processing clear and turbid qi material in the body. Okay, let's get back to our guide. So the body tissue for the fire element are the blood vessels. Straightforward. External manifestation is our facial complexion, specifically the forehead. Fun fact, if a child has a blue vein running across its forehead, it's typical that they had a really strong experience of birth trauma. Heart manifests the most on the forehead, but the fire element in general will manifest through our facial complexion. Rosy cheeks, pretty, blood vessels, right? Strong indicator fire element's doing well, but ruddy cheeks or broken blood vessels on the nose or the cheeks is going to indicate that things aren't doing so hot for the fire element. Sense organ is the mouth. Something that helps me remember is the heart channel actually goes all the way to the tongue. That big energy, someone who runs their mouth. Like me, I'm a fire element gal. Like, I fucking love to talk. The emotion for the fire element is joy, and I'm like hype girl joy city, if you know me. But we'll get more into the emotions in a little bit here. The body fluid for the fire element is sweat. Specifically, if we're looking at the heart channel association with the fire element, if you have really sweaty palms, then that's an indication that fire element and heart channel is off. Think about when you're really nervous, really emotional, because the heart has everything to do with all the emotions pretty much. If you're super emotional and you get sweaty palms, that's how that manifests. Then indicator of fire element here. But also if you just have excessive sweating, I was experiencing night sweats for a while, and because I was waking up and I was like, oh, I'm the wood element, 3 to 5 a.m. I was treating my liver, but I wasn't finding any improvement. And then I was like, wait, hold on. Sweat is the fluid for the fire channel. Heart channel, okay, heart 8 is a point on the heart channel that clears fire. Let me needle that point. And once I did, I had been sleeping like a baby ever since. And that was like a month ago. And I was experiencing like a month of insomnia. So again, broken record. Don't put yourself in an element box like I did. Energetic action and movement for the fire element is upward. Think about how fire moves upward. Heat rises. I feel like that's just kind of straightforward. But also, let's look at the external manifestation is the facial complexion, and the sense organ is the mouth. These are all parts of the upper body. The upper body in Chinese medicine is very yang in nature. Fire element, fire is like the most yang of all the elements. So it's constantly moving, the heat. Yeah. So hopefully that helps pull things together. I don't know if you heard that. I have chirping geckos in my house. Costa Rica. What are you going to do? Okay. So the mind and emotion for the fire element. So emotion is joy as well as excitement and shock. I feel like joy is pretty straightforward, but if you need a correlation, think of summer and then that phase of life. Oh, I didn't talk about the stage of development, did I? I don't think so. So it's young adulthood. So it's where we have this time of like maximum activity and establishing our identity. So it's a very joyful time in our life. Summer is super joyful. In the ebook that I made, I put a photo of people partying around a bonfire. I think of like a beach bonfire. Those are just some of like, to me, that's in like playing drums or playing good music, maybe passing around a joint, like eating watermelon. Like that is just the epitome of a beautiful summer. And usually if you're having a bonfire in the evening, you probably had a really great day with your friends at the beach or something. But let's move on stuff. Okay, excitement and shock. Sometimes we can experience way too much excitement to the point of mania, and that it can be detrimental if we're not able to process. That excitement can turn into shock. So that's kind of like, I guess, the dark side of the emotion of joy. I also like to think of dopamine. So in our society, we have an addiction to dopamine, and that very much is a correlation with the fire element. I could get deeper into that, but we're getting towards the end of this podcast already, and I need to get into earth and metal, so we're going to keep moving. The virtue for the fire element is propriety and love. So propriety, think of that spectrum of emotions from joy to shock or mania. You know, it's a really fine line, and with the virtue of propriety, it kind of keeps us from, I guess, being on the outskirts of society, of, you know, kind of losing your shit and being considered crazy. But also I see the fire element as being the element of community. You know, we gather around the fire together. And so propriety, you know, like while I personally can kind of be someone who kind of shits on propriety and like social standards and whatnot, but it is the unspoken glue that sort of weaves us all together. And then love, fire, heart, you get it. So the Shen aspect for the spirit is the Shen, and it has to do with our consciousness or seat of emotions. In my podcast about the spirits of Chinese medicine, I talk about how the fire element is sort of the manifestation of the higher self. But lately I've been thinking a lot about how rather than higher self, because it's this idea that there's something above us, I think the truest self is a way better way. It's more all-encompassing of what that aspect is. So yeah, that spirit aspect of the fire element is like our truest nature. Think about how fire is alchemizing. It brings out our truth. Okay. Earth element. Season is late summer. The climate or environmental factor is damp. So if you are similar to me and you grew up in close to the equator, then you know what late summer is all about. It is just rainy season. It's hurricane season, and the weather is super damp and the air is heavy. The direction for the earth element is the center. So the earth is the center of all the elements. And this just gives further emphasis to earth being one of the most important elements out of all of them. They're all equally important, but earth is really, it's sort of where the source of a lot of patterns of disbalance can arise. And I'll get it. I'll kind of touch on that while I explain the earth element a little bit further. So the time of day for the earth element times of day rather, are 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. The yin organ is the spleen, and the yang organ is the stomach. So stomach's time of day is 7 to 9 a.m. The spleen's time of day is 9 to 11 a.m. This is why, my friends, it's so important to eat breakfast. Eat breakfast like a queen or a king. This is where we have really good concentration, our ability to get work done. So there's this whole concept of, well, to be honest, I can't really remember the term, but my ex-husband told me about it, where I think it was his book of Thinking Fast and Slow. And our ability to do complex work is actually in the beginning of the day. And spleen, stomach, it's all about concentration and clear thinking. And so that just further attests to that. So like for me, if I have really creative work or complex work to get done, I will do it then. And then if I have really kind of like plug and chug sort of work, like meticulous editing, I will do it later in the day, where I can just put on music and I don't really have to think super critically. The stage of development or growth phase for the earth element is our middle adulthood. So this is the time in our life where we are nourishing what's been built. Late summer is also a time for when we're beginning the harvest, where if you're into gardening or farming, it's when agriculture, fruit, vegetables, plants reach that utmost maturity. So that middle adulthood phase. So let's get into the sensory and aesthetic. The color for the earth element is yellow. So yellow foods such as yellow squash, spaghetti squash, potatoes, bananas. Bananas are super, super grounding. Actually, fun fact, if you're coming down from a sort of psychedelic, bananas are very, very helpful in that situation. Turmeric is really helpful. So really root vegetables. Lemons would not be applicable here, just in terms of the flavor is the utmost sour. But if you want to connect it all together, if you have a warm glass of lemon water in the morning, it's actually really helpful for digestion. So, like maybe you could kind of relate it to the earth element here. So the tastes for the earth element. So earth is the only element that has two very contrasting flavors. So the tastes are sweet and bland. So looking at sweet, I'm not talking about your desserts here. We're looking at it more from a viewpoint of carbs. Oats, rice, potatoes, those carby, starchy foods, yucca, those are really, really aiding for the earth element. And then bland food would be, okay, like for example, yesterday, I did a fast, and how I broke my fast was having really bland oat and yucca porridge. I put like just a tiny little bit of salt, but for the most part, it tasted like nothing. And the reason why I use that to break my fast is because carbs, sweet, flavor, bland, I knew that it'd be very easy on my earth element to reintroduce foods into my system. The smell and odor for the earth element is fragrant. So think of overripe fruit or old flowers. The sound for the earth element is singing. So the earth element is also known as the mother element. So you can think of a mother singing to her child, but you can also think about some people, they have like a little bit of a sing-songy voice. Some people, they talk like this when they're nervous, and that kind of voice here, because the emotion is worry. But again, we'll get into that in just a little bit. So the body and organs, as I mentioned, yin, spleen, yang organ, stomach. Body tissues are the muscles and flesh. So think of it this way. Eating the food from the harvest, the earth element, will make us strong in our muscles. Eating too much food will make us fleshy. We'll just leave it at that. One thing I will say too, though, if you're somebody who is like my people who are a little bit more stocky, muscular, muscle tone is just like something that's really easy for you to have, then you have more of a body type of an earth element here. External manifestation would be the lips and the mouth. So I mentioned that the sense organ of the fire element is the mouth. So this is different. The external manifestation for the earth element is lips and mouth. So think of it this way. If the mouth, lips specifically, is looking dry, cracked, maybe you get mouth ulcers really easily, that's going to head towards your earth element. Especially mouth ulcers is an excess within the earth element channel. And actually, stomach is a yang organ of the earth element, but when there's excess fire in the stomach channel, then it will manifest as mouth ulcers. So maybe that complicated things, maybe that actually created more connection for you. So the sense organ of the earth element is the tongue. If I really want to get an idea of how somebody's doing in terms of dampness, in terms of their microbiome, I'm going to look at their tongue. Their whole tongue in general is going to give me an entire overview of everything that's happening in the body. If I really want to hone in on the earth element, though, I will look at their tongue coat as well as the center of their tongue. The body fluid for the earth element is saliva. And then the energetic action or movement of the earth element is holding. So think of earth as the center. Think of a mother that's holding her child. The mind and emotion aspects of the earth element. The emotions of the earth element are worry, pensiveness, and overthinking. I remember I had a teacher in the very beginning of my time in school. He listened to my pulse and he was like, "You're an overthinker." And I was just coming out of a time in my life where I had chronic digestive issues for a really long time. And I was still healing from sort of food allergies or a wood overacting earth pattern, my nervous system overacting on my digestive system. So now I know what that pulse is like. So I get to call people out if they're an overthinker too. The virtue of the earth element is sincerity and trust. So if you are excessively worrying and overthinking things, then you're likely believing that your mind is going to solve all your problems. But the truth is, your mind is only going to create more problems. And just as Einstein said, you can't fix a problem using the same, or like, what is that Einstein quote? All right, I'm going to paraphrase it here. I think it's like, you can't fix something using the same thing that caused the problem. So if your mind causes problems, you don't need your mind to fix problems. You need to trust universe, your community, life itself is going to help you, and let go of some control here. Stop trying to think your way out of things and just live and trust and feel. Follow your heart. In Taoist traditions, though, the earth element as the center represents all 5 virtues. The spirit or Shen aspect of the earth element is called the Yi, which has to do with discernment as well as manifestation. So earth element is all about the farmer in the field, harvesting, putting the work in, showing up every day. So the Hun, the aspect of the liver, is all about creativity. But without any earth element, that creativity, that imagination can't be drawn into the manifest and become something that's substantial that can nourish you and hold you and bring you forward in life. Okay, our final element, the metal element. Its season is autumn. Its climate or environmental factor is dry. So to jump around, the energetic action of the metal element or movement is descending and dispersing. So autumn, fall, it's that time when the leaves are descending from the trees and dispersing onto the ground to be absorbed by the earth. Fall is typically another time where there's a flare-up of allergies. So think of dry eyes, dry cough, or flu season, all those transitionary times of year, spring and autumn. Metal and wood are very much transition types of elements. They're going to, be associated with allergies or cold and flu season. The direction for the metal element is west. The time of day on the organ clock are 3 to 5 a.m. So the yin organ of the metal element is the lungs. So, and the lungs are very susceptible to dryness. I think, again, dry cough. So 3 to 5 a.m. are the times for the lungs. And then 5 to 7 a.m. is associated with the yang organ of the metal element, which is the large intestine. If we have a really great running organ system, descending and dispersing, the large intestine, usually when we wake up in the morning, we will be having a very clean and easy bowel movement, releasing, descending, dispersing, letting go. But if you're waking up between 4 to 6 a.m. and you're having excessive bowel movements, we call it, or especially diarrhea, we call it cock's crow diarrhea, waking up when when the rooster is crowing, that is a deficiency typically within the metal element here. The stage of development or growth phase of the metal element is late adulthood. So it's a time of reflection as well as letting go. So think of a typical lifestyle. In middle adulthood, they're taking care of their kids, and then the kids leave, and then they're no longer working, so they're retiring, and maybe they're downsizing, and they're just starting to really hone in before they get to that elderhood of like what truly is important in life. The sensory and aesthetic of the metal element. Color is white, so think of garlic, onion, radish. Those are super nourishing foods for our metal element. The taste is pungent or spicy. The smell or odor is rotten. I feel like that's pretty straightforward. And the sound is crying because the emotion is sadness and grief. So somebody who hasn't cried in years and they're bragging about it, metal element. Somebody who cries really easily, metal element. And usually it's a difficulty in just letting it go. All right, body organs, as I mentioned, yin organ, lungs, yang organ, large intestine, body tissues, skin and body hair. So this is different. The skin is different from the flesh. The flesh is that thing you pinch. You pull and from the bone, and like that you can pinch it in your hand. The skin is that outermost layer. And then we have our body hair too. So somebody who actually, this is for my fellow Hispanic chicas who have been teased for their body hair. Your body hair is a sign that you indeed have a healthy metal element. Congratulations. Super dry skin is going to be associated with metal element. Just any skin issues in general, though, is going to usually point to the metal or lung especially, but also large intestine. If we have a buildup within the colon, and the large intestine is really strongly responsible for separating clear from turbid. So rashes usually going to point, again, to large intestine, metal element here. Sense organ for the metal element is the nose. Think of that dry, itchy nose, or maybe you have a cold and you have a cough and you're also having a drippy nose. Body fluids, speaking of drippy nose, mucus. So they say that mucus actually in Chinese medicine, they say it begins with the earth element, with the food that we eat in the digestive system. So mucus begins in the spleen and stomach, but it is held and stored in the lungs. So if you are treating mucus and you're only focusing on the lung pathways, your immune system very much is associated with the metal element, but you're not addressing digestion or vice versa, then it's an incomplete treatment. Energetic action, as I mentioned, is descending and dispersing. So the emotion is sadness and grief. So typically, what is a time in our life where we experience the most sadness and grief? When somebody that we know, rely on, love, leaves us. It could be through death. It could be through life changes. And so that inability to let them go will typically move us into, that grief phase. But just as a part of grief, it has that full spectrum of emotions, right? Like grief isn't just one thing. No emotion actually is that one label. Within grief, what else do we have? We have shock, we have anger, but most importantly, we have acceptance. Without acceptance, the metal element isn't able to really do its job. It's just so important to be able, and acceptance really is one of the most important things that we can learn in this lifetime. The virtue of the metal element is righteousness. So for me, what I think of is that samurai who is all about honor and righteousness, and he wields his samurai sword. Also, the metal element is very much about the ability to really make exacting decisions. For example, when I broke up with my ex-husband, I went and got a treatment from a 5-element specialist, so an acupuncturist who went to a school specifically for the 5-element theory. She heard my story and she was like, wow, you were super metal about your letting go and being very righteous and walking within your truth. So righteousness is not about right or wrong per se. It's about walking within truth, walking the path connected with what you know is right and to be true. The spirit and Shen aspect of the metal element is the Po. So this is kind of associated with our animal soul as well as our instinct. Well, what do you know? We are over an hour. We are over my allotted time for this podcast. I feel like you've been given a lot of information to digest. So we're going to leave it here. If you would like to learn more about the cycles, so the cycles are methods of recognizing systems of balance and imbalance. They're really key in terms of learning how to regulate yourself within the phases of life. And when you see that you resonate more within maybe this phase of your life, or maybe within all your life with one element here, then you have to rely on the different cycles. We have the generating cycle, the control and overacting cycles, as well as the insulting cycle. You rely on those to maintain balance within your life. So there's 2 things that you can do. One, you can sign up for my newsletter and you will get the 5-element theory guidebook ebook here. And on page 9, I dive into the cycles and 9 and onwards. So we do a deep dive and I do comparisons with nature as well as growth and life and death phases within our lives. Or, making my official announcement here, I have a Patreon now. So on my Patreon, I have guided meditations. I also will have the last half of my really long podcast. So any podcast from here on out that runs over an hour, I'm going to be putting that last portion of the podcast on Patreon with a reasonable fee. You will gain access to the other side of the hour of my podcasts. And so this is really for my enthusiasts, my people who just can't get enough of all this Chinese medicine stuff. So if you would like to become a supporter, you can find my Patreon in the show notes. All right, my friend, as always, it is such a pleasure to be sitting with you, sharing this information. Thank you for your attention, your enthusiasm on all these things. You are a real one for making it this far. If you would like to dive deeper into understanding how the 5 elements manifests within your body and you would like to work with me, you can find my information in the show notes. It's different as I am working remotely. It's not really, we put less time into the acupuncture treatment, obviously, because I'm not there next to you. And we put more time into really deeply understanding the philosophy. We call it lifestyle counseling. You can call it coaching, but there's a lot of different theories within Chinese medicine. So what we would do is we would really figure out which theory resonates best with you, hone in, and empower you to follow the whispers of your body and really become the ultimate authority on your health. So again, you can find that information on services in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast episode and you want to share with a friend, that's probably the best thing that you could do to help this podcast grow. But if you also want to show your gratitude, leave a review, leave a rating, like, subscribe, all the things. All right, sending you my love as always, and I'll be feeling your energy the next time I'm behind this mic.